I spent 30 hours building this giant desert castle village in LEGO Fortnite. I not only wanted to make this video because I wanted to give you guys a tour and show off the village, but I also wanted to give some commentary and insight on some of the building techniques and planning that went into this build. Alright, so starting off at the bottom, we have what I am calling the Farmlands, and this has a couple little townhouses and then the actual farm area. So the farm, of course, it's got every different kind of plantable item that's currently in the game. Surrounding the farm, we have a couple of these different townhouses that I built, and a lot of them use the wooden cabin pieces, but I inverted them so the cabin part is facing inside, and then what would be the inside is now the outside, but it shows bricks on this side instead of what would be logs. In my opinion, this gave me kind of a unique look for these kind of houses, since there's not really any sort of prefabricated buildings in the game that look like this. I tried to make it as detailed as I could down here, but this is the part of the village that I worked on absolutely last, and I started to hit the high complexity area limit. So I tried not to go too crazy, but there's a little area right here, kind of like a little bar gazebo area. Watchtower's got a little campfire on it, which has a bridge which goes over that little cabin, and then over here, which goes to a little spiral staircase. Now these arches are technically part of the castle, but it's best viewed from down here. But I went with like this giant, really long archway kind of technique going here. Then that brings us to the first structure that's actually going to start to lead us up this mountain and village. So down here is actually where I have all my storage and all my different stuff for actually making it an operational base for myself. From here, we can actually go out to this balcony out front. From there, we can take the stairs all the way up to this little bar area. This was actually, I put a lot of detail into this because it was going to be open-faced and you can see it from the outside. So this definitely got the detail treatment. Then as we move on, we have this tower. And again, a lot of my interiors are not worked on this village just because I made it so large. I basically just focused on the exterior look of it. So once we get to this tower, we can actually go right this way, or we can go left this way, and that'll also get us to the top of the keep. Going left though, we see this really awesome ladder technique, which I actually learned from Ginger J91. It's really easy. We're just gonna take this rustic railing corner piece right here, and you're gonna place one like this, flip it, and then place another one right next to it, and then you just repeat that and stack it up. I also decided to add like a little granite foundation behind it, but otherwise it's a really good technique and it looks great. Also, we have this really conveniently placed geyser so you can traverse through the village that way as well. So moving on this way will take us to this structure, and again, this one just doesn't have any sort of interior work really other than the stairways, but this will take us all the way to the top of the structure, which is where this giant tower starts. Now as we start to work our way up the tower, we can either get off halfway here, and that takes us to what I think is like level 3 of the base, or we can keep going up and up like 2 or 3 more stories, and that'll eventually take us to the main keep at the tippy top. So now if we go back to that same spot and we go right, we actually have another decision to make. We can either go left up these stairs, or we can go right into this building and continue upward. And once again, no interior work done. Didn't have enough build space for this village, but as we continue to go up, that'll lead us to this exterior staircase, which will again lead us right back up to the tippy top for the main keep. The keep is also accessible, so we can go in through here. Again, very little detail. I got my throne there for sure though, but we can go up and there's a little staircase that will take us all the way to the top of this building, which is a nice little balcony right at the top with the top view. So I built a ladder going down to this rooftop, which is on this structure. Now this structure actually doesn't have any way to get inside of it. It's mostly just for show, and it was meant to just fill this space of rock that was kind of looked like a bald spot to me when I was going through building this base. So this is kind of just for show, but most of the other buildings actually have interior. So from the top, we can actually take this last alternative route, which is pretty much the most boring, but I tried to make as many different ways that you could travel through this village as possible. So this way will bring us right back down to the front side of this building here. And then if we wanted to go up these stairs, we could go all the way back up to this level and then go back through here. And we're back to the tower, which again can take us back down to this building or back up to the top. So like I said, there's many different ways to get from one end of the base to the other, or from point A to point B to point C. It's very windy. One of my favorite details other than this little bar area is these statues I put up top. I didn't use a lot of these statues in the village, but this just came together really nicely as a centerpiece for the front bottom of the village, which I also ended up using at the very top of the village as well, just to kind of add something to this roof. One thing worth mentioning is I did do this in survival, and these flags and banners are quite costly on the silk and wool fabric. It ended up costing me a lot of materials to add all the little details to this base. So a few things I definitely learned while working with all these castle pieces for 30 hours was definitely don't go too heavy on these statues, otherwise it'll get real repetitive real fast. And then another thing is, and it's almost my signature style at this point, but exterior staircases and little bridges are kind of my go-to, like, kind of way to just make the village have a little bit of contrast and have a little bit of just difference to it, so it makes it pop a little more. But that's definitely a tip I would use in your villages, is like this one's my favorite. Like at night, I left this part specifically with no lanterns on it, so that way at night you just see like a black silhouette of the staircase, and it looks fantastic. Because castle pieces are mostly this gray color, adding a little bit of brown here and there will definitely make the village contrast a lot more. Same thing with these green rooftops. I didn't want to go absolutely crazy with them, but I tried to use them in enough places where it added just that much more contrast to the village. So one general tip I have for making your castles look just a little bit better is at the bottom, I like to use either these half walls that have the kind of, it flares out at the bottom, and then at the top of the top layer of whatever structure or castle you're building, you use these half walls which flare out at the top, and it gives your castle just like the most subtle hourglass kind of shape to it, where it starts out a little more flared out at the bottom, and then the top it flares out again. And it looks really nice. And on top of that, there's not only these half wall pieces you can use, but at least for the bottom flare out piece, there is some of these windows. There's a double version of it and an 8 wide version of it. So these are what I used here, but otherwise the half walls work just as well. But then you kind of have to even it out with another half wall on top of that. So just keep that in mind. Another thing worth mentioning for this technique is for the corners, you want to also use the half corner pillar piece and then the half corner pillar piece that has the flare at the top, so that way your corners flare out evenly with that top layer as well. It looks really good. Another really good tip to keep in mind is the fact that you can phase builds through the terrain, but you cannot phase builds through other builds. So here you can see I've got these archways, and a lot of them are just phasing through walls, phasing through the ground, but it looks really good in my opinion. If you're having trouble getting things to phase into the right spot, I just deleted this one that was right here so I can show you. But essentially getting this into there is impossible unless you snap it to the piece that's next to it. And as long as there's no actual builds blocking it down there, this will phase through. And, you know, instead of it having be a gap right there, I can phase another one through right here, and it fills in this gap perfectly, even though you can barely see it, but it completes this little arch piece right here. Now, I wish I had better quality footage of when I was actually building this. How I ended up planning this, it's pretty simple. I mean, I started with a big square box here. It didn't have any windows, any of the detailing. It was just a big square gray box, just so I can get the size kind of figured out. And then once I had that big gray box all done, I built a stairway next to it. Didn't add any railings, just the stairway. And it was just a big gray box with a smooth platform. I added this bar way later. And then that's when I added this tower, because I was like, well, how else am I going to elevate myself? So I built this big square box as a base, and then I built a skinny square box going straight up. So again, this didn't have any windows to start. It didn't have any real detail at all. It was just a big square box going straight up. And then when I got that box built, I just built some floor pieces around it until I got to here. And that's when I kind of just started throwing in floor pieces at the level that this mountain goes to. And I kind of just, after that, again, I didn't even start on this building. What I did first was I planned the stair route. So these stairs actually got built very early on. And then same with the floor pieces, just so I could get the map/layout of how I was going to get to the top. So this stairway that I'm going through right now was actually the first line that I built. It was very undetailed. It was basically just a line of stairs, tiles, that led from the top all the way to here. And that kind of gave me an idea in my mind where I could place stuff. Now that I have the path to the top, I can start placing things. And that's kind of when I don't remember where I went next. I kind of just started tiling out this level of the Like you can see right here it ends. I don't go any further back really than the front face of this mountain, but I just started making pathways. And then here, this is where I decided right here, this little ledge kind of ends right here. So obviously if I wanted to build this structure, I had to build a platform out. And that's what got me to thinking, oh, well, if I got to build a bigger platform, I might as well make some sort of cool archway support structure that holds it all up and makes it look somewhat realistic, right? And then that gave me the perfect foundation to build this structure on. And again, this structure isn't necessarily a square. I left a little cut in the corner here. But again, when I started this structure, it didn't have any of the statues, any of the windows. I just had a basic plain box with this indent in the corner here. And then I planned out where I wanted my stairs. And then later I went back and just destroyed wall pieces and added the windows I wanted in their place. And then once I got this structure built up, I was like, okay, this was essentially a very basic box. And then on top of this basic box, I just started building another skinny box straight up. So again, didn't start with any details. I was just going for like bare minimum mapping and designing. So that way I could just kind of make the rest of it a little bit easier and where I wanted to put everything. So that's kind of how I planned this whole thing out. It was kind of all on a whim, but it was calculated as I went. I actually got this idea from World of Warcraft of all things. So if you played World of Warcraft and you've played for the Alliance, there's a city called Ironforge. It's a dwarven city that's built into a mountain. And if you go around this city, on the outside of the map, you will see the mountain that Ironforge is built into. And then on top of that, since it's built into a mountain, you'll see all these little windows and things sticking out of the mountain, which are, you know, protruding parts of the city where like a window sticks out of the mountain. So this kind of got me thinking I can almost do the same thing by phasing in some of the pieces into the wall and then making it look like, you know, there's people inside the mountain living in there, even though obviously you can't access it at all. So now that it's nighttime, we can get a nice aerial view because I did add lighting, and this definitely added to the high complexity. And why I couldn't add as much detail to the interiors is because I just added so much detail and so many pieces to the exterior. But I did get the entire village lit, so it looks very nice at night. There you have it. That is my desert castle village in LEGO Fortnite that took me 30 hours to build. If you want to get some insight on how to kind of improve your builds or work towards something like this, definitely follow and then check out my streams over on TikTok and Twitch. I go live there pretty much every night. I am a late night streamer. I start my lives at about midnight Mountain Standard Time, but I go live every single day. I try to go live and do some fun builds here in LEGO Fortnite and kind of push the limits of what can be done. So if you're into LEGO Fortnite and you really like building, be sure to subscribe because I'm just getting starting with what I can build in this game.